The Mississippi River is dying in real time. Right now, on March 6, 2026, water levels at gauging stations from Minnesota to Louisiana are registering numbers that hydrologists say should be impossible. Readings are so low that the riverbed itself is exposed for the first time in recorded history. And what scientists found on that bottom is not just shocking. It is a warning so severe that federal emergency agencies are using a phrase they have never used before about America's greatest river. The system is failing. The collapse begins. March 6, 2026, 4:52 a.m. Central Standard Time. An automated gauging station, 0737400 at Baton Rouge, Louisiana, transmits a water surface elevation reading that stops the overnight monitoring team cold. The number on the screen read -11.3 feet. Not low, not critically low. Minus below the established zero datum, a measurement that the United States Geological Survey's own instrumentation was never calibrated to record because no one in the history of American hydrology believed it was possible. Within 8 minutes, the National Weather Service Mississippi River Forecast Center in Slidell, Louisiana activates its highest internal alert protocol. Supervisors are called in from home. The Army Corps of Engineers receives emergency notification across all 7 river divisions simultaneously. By 5:30 a.m., the Coast Guard begins broadcasting urgent marine advisories across all navigation channels from Cairo, Illinois to the Gulf of Mexico. At 6:14 in the morning, the first barge groundings are confirmed. 3 fully loaded grain barges operated by American Commercial Barge Line run aground near Natchez, Mississippi, in a channel that was fully navigable just 72 hours earlier. Each vessel carries 1,500 tons of cargo. All 3 are immovable. By 7 in the morning, 14 additional vessels report grounding incidents across a 200-mile stretch of river. Port captains begin issuing emergency stop orders. Navigation on the lower Mississippi is shutting down in real time. The numbers arriving from upstream are devastating and accelerating. Memphis, Tennessee, records a stage of -4.7 feet. The lowest reading since systematic measurement began in 1872. Vicksburg, Mississippi, registers -8.1 feet. The river is not just low. It is collapsing at a rate measuring 0.4 feet per hour at multiple gauging stations simultaneously. Army Corps engineers stare at trend lines that are pointing in one direction, straight down. There is no trough in sight. There is no stabilization signal in the data. The river is still falling. By 8 in the morning on March 6th, the Mississippi River is effectively closed to commercial navigation along 600 miles of its lower reach. The most important commercial waterway in the Western Hemisphere has gone silent, and in the silence, something extraordinary is being revealed. What they found on the riverbed. This riverbed was never supposed to be visible. Not to aerial surveys, not to satellites, not to human eyes. The Mississippi has run over this ground for thousands of years, and the bottom has stayed buried under billions of gallons of moving water. The sediment stays down. The secrets stay down. Everything the river swallowed over the centuries stays swallowed. Not anymore. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration survey teams out of Baton Rouge reach the 40-mile exposed section near Natchez and find something that stops them cold. Ancient cypress stumps, black and perfectly preserved, protrude from the mud in dense clusters, stretching as far as the eye can see. Carbon dating places them at 50,000 years old. These are not erosion remnants. These are pre-Ice Age forests the river consumed millennia ago. It is giving them back now, and nobody knows what to do with that. But the trees are not what triggers the emergency calls. Dr. Patricia Weller at the U.S. Geological Survey National Water Center in Tuscaloosa receives the first sediment core results from the exposed channel floor, and she goes quiet. Stratified layers of mercury, polychlorinated biphenyls, arsenic, and other heavy metals sit 40 feet deep in the riverbed, rated by the Environmental Protection Agency as acutely hazardous. They were deposited in the 1940s and the 1950s, buried, declared permanently entombed, considered no longer a threat by every scientific assessment on record. Every one of those assessments is now wrong. Wind is already carrying dried, contaminated particles into Natchez and Vicksburg. Air quality alerts go out within hours. Residents within 2 miles of the bank are ordered indoors across 31 miles of exposed toxic sediment. And then, the sonar data arrives. Subsurface voids. Cavern-like formations up to 60 feet across, running in clusters beneath the riverbed for 90 miles. The channel is not just empty, it is hollow underneath. The science of collapse. Why this is happening. At the U.S. Geological Survey Water Resources Mission Area Headquarters in Reston, Virginia, hydrologists convene an emergency briefing on the morning of March 6th that one attendee later describes as the most alarming scientific meeting of his 30-year career. The data they assemble paints a picture of catastrophic convergence. Multiple independent systems are failing simultaneously, each one devastating on its own. And together, they are incomprehensible. The immediate driver is the most severe drought in the Mississippi River Basin in 1,200 years. Paleoclimate records extracted from tree rings across the upper Midwest confirm that the current drought conditions exceed anything in the geological record stretching back to the 9th century. Soil moisture levels across the 1.2 million square mile drainage basin measure 67% below the lowest readings previously recorded by satellite instrumentation. Tributaries that feed the Mississippi are not just low. The Des Moines River in Iowa recorded 0 surface flow for 11 consecutive days in February 2026. The Arkansas River at Little Rock is running at 3% of its historical average. The river is starving. But drought alone does not explain what the instruments are reading. Dr. Jonathan Reeves, Chief Hydrologist at the Army Corps of Engineers, Mississippi Valley Division, reviews groundwater extraction data with an expression his colleagues describe as barely contained panic. The Midwest has been pumping the underlying aquifer system at accelerating rates for 40 years. Since 1985, groundwater extraction across the basin has increased by 340%. The Mississippi River does not just receive surface runoff. In lower flow conditions, it receives base flow, water that seeps upward from the saturated zone of underlying aquifers into the channel. That base flow accounts for 40% of the river's minimum discharge during dry periods. The aquifer is exhausted. The base flow has stopped. University of Minnesota climatologist Dr. Sarah Okonkwo presents atmospheric modeling data that makes the situation worse. 3 La Nina events in 5 years that drove the current drought were not predicted by any model at this frequency until 2045 at the earliest. The jet stream disruption is now permanently diverting Pacific moisture away from the central United States, and it represents a reorganization of atmospheric circulation patterns that climate models projected as a late 21st century scenario. It is happening now, in 2026, decades ahead of schedule. The models were wrong. The future arrived early, and the Mississippi River is the first catastrophic proof. The infrastructure nightmare. The river supports infrastructure that the United States cannot function without. Most Americans do not know it exists. They are about to find out. There are 43 water intake structures along the lower Mississippi that serve municipal water systems for a combined population of 2.3 million people. Each one was engineered to a minimum river stage. As of March 6, 2026, 27 of those intake structures are operating below their certified minimum design elevation. Engineers at the Louisiana Department of Health convene an emergency conference call at 9 a.m. that establishes a timeline no one in the room wants to accept. If the river drops another 18 inches, 11 municipal water systems will lose the ability to draw from the river entirely. New Orleans, a city of 380,000 people, has 72 hours of emergency water reserves. The bridge situation is equally catastrophic and less visible. The Army Corps of Engineers, Bridge Inspection Division, identifies 19 major highway and rail bridges across the lower Mississippi whose foundation scour protection was engineered for water levels no less than 8 feet above current readings. Scour, the erosion of riverbed sediment around bridge foundations caused by accelerating current velocity in a constricted channel, intensifies exponentially as the channel narrows and deepens. Real-time monitoring instruments installed on 6 of these bridges register foundation movement readings at 3 p.m. on March 6th that trigger automatic alerts to the Federal Highway Administration. The Missouri Department of Transportation closes the Interstate 55 bridge at Memphis to all traffic at 4:17 p.m., pending emergency structural assessment. The Federal Railroad Administration issues a 10-mile-per-hour speed restriction on all rail crossings south of St. Louis. The figure that keeps Army Corps engineers awake is the one they have not yet released publicly. 2 nuclear generating stations along the lower Mississippi River use river water for cooling operations. Both are certified to operate at minimum river flows specified in their Nuclear Regulatory Commission licenses. Both are currently operating below those minimums. NRC emergency operations personnel begin 24-hour on-site monitoring at both facilities. The plants are not in danger, not yet. But the margin between current conditions and a forced shutdown order is now measured in inches of river stage, not feet. The human cost. Thomas Arsenault has farmed soybeans on the same 1,400 acres outside Vidalia, Louisiana for 38 years. His irrigation system draws from the river through a pump station his grandfather built in 1961. On the morning of March 6, 2026, he walks to the river's edge and stands in a place he has never stood before. Dry ground. 20 feet from where the water normally runs, he is standing on riverbed. His pump intake is sucking air. He has 11 days of soil moisture left before his winter wheat crop fails completely. There is no alternative water source. There is no timeline for river recovery. There is no answer on the other end of the phone when he calls the local extension office. There is just the cracked mud and the smell of exposed sediment, and the slow understanding that everything he built is standing on ground that the river no longer covers. In the communities that line the lower Mississippi, the human emergency is unfolding faster than response agencies can track it. Greenville, Mississippi, population 28,000, relies on a river water system now operating at 14% above the intake failure threshold. City officials distribute bottled water from National Guard trucks on the morning of March 6th, while assuring residents that the situation is under control. The assurances do not match the expressions on the faces of the engineers behind the officials at the press conference. Elderly residents who cannot reach distribution points are identified by emergency coordinators working door to door in temperatures that drop to 28 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. A 74-year-old woman named Dorothy Simmons tells the volunteer handing her a case of water that she has lived on this river her entire life. She has never seen it like this. She does not use the word terrifying, but she does not need to. The mental health dimension of the crisis emerges within hours. Emergency shelter operators in Natchez report residents arriving in states of profound shock. These are not people displaced by flood or fire. Their homes are intact. Their possessions are dry. But the river that defined their geography, their economy, their identity, and their daily existence has simply stopped being the river they knew. The psychological literature has no good framework for this. The landscape itself has changed. The thing that was always there is gone. The economic artery is bleeding out. The Mississippi River system carries 60% of all grain exported by the United States. Corn, soybeans, and wheat from farms across the entire interior of the country move by barge down this river to the port of South Louisiana, the largest grain export facility on Earth. That system moves an average of $180 million in agricultural commodities every single day. On March 6, 2026, it moves nothing. By noon, the American Commercial Barge Line reports 340 vessels, either grounded, anchored awaiting conditions, or unable to load at terminal facilities, operating in emergency low water protocols. A CBL Ingram Barge, and Kirby Corporation collectively suspend all lower Mississippi operations. The total cargo value sitting motionless on or alongside the river exceeds $2.1 billion. Global commodity futures markets react immediately. Chicago Board of Trade corn futures spike 14% in the first hour of trading. Soybean futures hit limit up. Agricultural economists at Iowa State University issue a rapid assessment concluding that a 2-week navigation closure will cost American farmers between $4.2 and $6.8 billion in lost export revenue. The damage to the ports themselves is staggering and accelerating. The Port of New Orleans, the Port of South Louisiana, and the Port of Baton Rouge collectively handle more tonnage annually than any other port complex in the Western Hemisphere. All three issue force majeure declarations by 2 p.m. on March 6th. Terminal operators shut loading equipment. Export elevators cease operations. Longshoremen go home. International grain buyers in Japan, South Korea, Egypt, and Mexico begin emergency procurement calls to Brazilian and Argentine suppliers within hours of the navigation closure announcement. The United States is not just losing this week's revenue, it is losing market share. It may never recover. Food security analysts at the USDA issue an internal assessment concluding that a 30-day Mississippi closure would trigger food price inflation across 40 nations that depend on American grain exports for basic nutrition security. The river that built the American interior economy is demonstrating in real time that it can also destroy it. What the bottom is telling us, the geological warning. The alarm that jolts seismologists awake on the night of March 6th does not come from a flood sensor or a hydrologist. It comes from a ground deformation station buried along the New Madrid seismic zone in the Missouri Boot Heel. The instrument is picking up micro-seismic signatures that match one pattern and one pattern only: sediment compaction collapse. The New Madrid zone is the most dangerous fault system east of the Rocky Mountains. It runs directly beneath the lower Mississippi for 120 miles. The earthquakes of 1811 and 1812 that temporarily reversed the river's flow originated here. USGS seismologist Dr. Marcus Webb reviews the overnight logs and delivers his assessment in 3 words. This is new. The fault is not rupturing. This is not tectonic. What is happening has been theorized for decades, but never witnessed at this scale. The Mississippi's water column exerts billions of tons of downward pressure on the underlying crust. That pressure suppresses seismic activity along the New Madrid Fault. It stabilizes the ground by simply sitting on it. Engineers call the reverse process pressure release seismicity. Remove the water load quickly enough, and the crust responds. 47 micro-seismic events in 18 hours. The normal background rate is 2 to 3 per week. The magnitudes are small, 0.8 to 1.9, but the trend line is not leveling off. It is climbing. NASA interferometry data compounds the dread. Ground deformation measurements across a 200 square mile section of the lower floodplain show differential settling of 3 to 5 millimeters per week, directly above the sonar-detected riverbed voids. The land is sinking above the hollow places. Scientists have a term for what happens when a river abandons its channel under sufficient stress. Channel avulsion. The Mississippi has done it before. It does not ask permission. It just goes. Is this America's new normal? At NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System headquarters in Boulder, Colorado, climate scientists convene an emergency session on the afternoon of March 6th to assess what the Mississippi crisis reveals about the trajectory of the American hydrological system. The conclusions they reach do not comfort anyone in the room. The drought driving the Mississippi collapse is not an anomaly within the current climate system. It is the expected output of a climate system that has reorganized itself. The 3 La Nina events in 5 years that starved the river basin of precipitation are not a statistical fluke. They are the leading edge of a new atmospheric regime. Computer models running on updated emissions trajectories show a central United States that faces conditions of this severity, or worse, once every 7 to 9 years by 2045. Under current emissions trajectories, once every 4 years by 2060. The infrastructure of the Mississippi River system, including the locks, the dams, the levees, the navigation channels, and the intake structures, was designed for the 20th century river. Every safety margin, every engineering standard, every regulatory threshold was calibrated to a hydrological baseline that no longer exists. The river the Army Corps of Engineers built the system to manage is a different river than the one running through those structures today. Dr. Amara Osei Bonsu, climate systems analyst at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, presents her findings to the NOAA emergency session with the measured tone of someone delivering a verdict rather than a warning. The Mississippi River system is not experiencing a once-in-a-century event, she tells the assembled scientists. It is experiencing the first major expression of a permanently altered hydrological regime. What we are watching today is not the worst-case scenario. It is the new baseline. The question is no longer whether conditions like this will return. The question is, how much worse the next iteration will be. Climate models that projected this level of severity for 2050 or beyond got the timeline wrong by a generation. The future arrived in 2026. The river is the proof, and the institutions designed to manage it have run out of time to prepare. The reckoning. 1 week from today, if the river does not recover, 11 municipal water systems will begin implementing emergency rationing for a combined population of 890,000 people. The navigation closure will have cost American agriculture more than $8 billion. The foundation monitoring sensors on 6 Mississippi River bridges will have generated enough concerning data to trigger additional closures. And the subsurface void expansion beneath the lower channel will have reached a scale that forces the Army Corps of Engineers to admit publicly what its engineers already know privately. There is no engineering solution to this problem that can be deployed in the time frame the crisis demands. The President signs a federal disaster declaration for 7 Mississippi River states on the evening of March 6, 2026. It is the widest geographic scope of any single disaster declaration in American history. FEMA deploys to 11 field offices. The Army Corps activates its Emergency Operations Center around the clock. Congress schedules emergency appropriations hearings for March 9th. The funding requests being assembled by federal agencies total $34 billion. No one believes that is the final number. Money cannot make it rain. Money cannot refill an aquifer that took 10,000 years to fill and 40 years to empty. Money cannot reverse the atmospheric reorganization that diverted Pacific moisture away from the central United States. Money cannot undo the exposure of the 31 miles of toxic sediment now drying in the March sun. And money cannot answer the question that no federal agency, no university research center, and no government official has been willing to ask out loud on March 6, 2026. Even though every hydrologist, every geomorphologist, and every climate scientist examining the data knows the question is the only one that ultimately matters. What if the river does not come back? Not this year. Not to what it was. What if the Mississippi River that American civilization was built beside, built upon, built from, is gone? What if the 20th century river is the river that history books will describe? The way they describe rivers that ran for millennia and then, under the weight of a changed world, simply stopped being what they were. The gauging stations continue transmitting. The numbers continue falling. The riverbed continues emerging from the retreating water, ancient and exposed and silent, offering up its secrets to a civilization that may have waited too long to hear them. The river that made America is telling America something. The only question left is whether America is listening.